Hello everyone, welcome to this Harmony and Health event. I'm Julia Outlaw, one of the team. And this event is part of our support for practical support for long COVID sufferers, navigating a path back to health. And the aim really was to offer something natural, offer something that people can try that does no harm, and that can help bring us, our bodies, minds, emotions back towards balance and help health in that way. And today we've got a real treat. The theme is creating, and we'll be creating some sound, some food, and also more energy. I'll introduce today's presenters. So first, we've got the fabulous Gaia Sanskrit here. She is an internationally renowned singer and songwriter and an expert on Sanskrit and Sanskrit chanting. She's been learning it since she was 4, studied it at university, and now teaches it in many different settings. And she's going to take us through some chanting today, which can be very healing. Next, we have Dr Eleni Tsiompanou, who you may well know. Dr Eleni is a founding member of the Harmony and Health team, and she is an Ayurvedic doctor, as well as being a palliative care consultant. And she's going to talk to us about seasonal recipes, so summer food and things that we can try that will help our bodies at this time. And last, we have Dr Joanna Byers, who is not with us quite yet. She's still at work. She works at the major trauma unit at Addenbrooke's. She's an occupational therapist, and she's also a mental well-being practitioner. And she's very interested in helping people recover from fatigue. And today she's going to talk to us about how you can manage cognitive fatigue, which I know a lot of us have suffered from. So that's the lineup for today. And we'll have questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat as they come up. We'll have some time at the end as well to discuss. And I will hand over to Gabriella.
Hello everybody, or as they say in the Sanskrit language, namaskaram or namaste, which is namaskaram is the act of surrendering everything that has gone before to be devoted only to this precise moment. So adya vayam Sanskrite bhashayam bahavaha shabdaha gayishyamaha. Today, in the language of Sanskrit, we will sound some mantras or sounds together and explore the quality of these sounds and their capacity for healing. And this is a practical exploration, and it's going to be something that we'll try out together. And as it's the summer solstice coming up, and the sun in the Sanskrit tradition is called Surya, Suryaha. It's nice to try sounding this word because it's a beautiful, beautiful word. Surya, Surya, the sun. It's said to have the healing elements in it. So su is to do with sweetness, goodness, juiciness, health and well-being. And Surya is that sweetness, juiciness, health and well-being that is connected with ya. And you see ya in Sanskrit is a syllable which represents the heart. So connecting with the sun via the Sanskrit language would be to really connect to the heart. So let's first, before we begin the sounding together, we thought it would be nice to start with just listening to some Sanskrit sounds and chants so you can have a sense of this beautiful language. So often when I sound, I will close my eyes, but this is purely so I'm not distracted by your beautiful faces, because if I see you, I could get caught up in some moments and get distracted. And there's an option for you to close your eyes, but it's totally optional. And the only reason I do it, as I said, is to focus purely on the sound, because this exploration is on the sound only. It's nothing to do with vision. So what you will hear now is a very, very, very ancient chant. It's one of the all Sanskrit chants are ancient, but this is one of the most ancient Sanskrit chants because it comes from the Vedas, and they are texts that have been preserved in the Sanskrit language since at least 2000 BC. And this particular chant to the sun is from one of the first of these Vedic texts, and it was traditionally sung. So it is a chant, but it has a melody to it in a way. And this melody is said to have been unchanged for thousands of years. And from the palm leaf manuscripts, people can still see what the melody was meant to be. There's a code, just like a music code in Western music. So here begins this chant to the sun. And then following this, we can explore some very simple sounds together and see if they can be of practical benefit to each of us as individuals. So I'll close my eyes and begin this exploration, this chant to the sun. Om Bhurbhuvah Suvah Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. Om Tatsaviturvarenyo Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Dayo Om Bhuhu Bhuhu Hoi Bhuhu Hoi Bhuhu Hava E Suvarjoti Om Bhuvaha Bhuvaha Hoi Bhuvaha Hoi Bhuvaha Hava E Suvarjoti Om Suvaha Suvaha Hoi Suvaha Hoi Suvaha Hava E Suvarjoti Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Lovely.
It truly is lovely. It really, really is. So this chant that was heard is to do directly with invoking the sun. And now we'll take 3 sounds from this chant and we'll sound these together. So the sounds from the chant are bhur, bhuva, and swaha. They are bhur. So we sound that together, and it's not just b, u, bhur, it's bhu. So it's bhur, bhur. See, when we sound Sanskrit, we have to use all of our bodies. When I say all the body, I mean not just the head, teeth, lips, tongue, not just the throat, but also the abdomen. So when we sound Sanskrit, the belly must be connected with. So when we sound this bhur, the belly comes in and the breath comes out. So the belly comes in, breath comes up and out. Bhur. It's like you're exploding the sound. That's it. And this is part of the healing aspect of the Sanskrit chanting. It's working certain muscles. It's working with the breath. Bhur, bhur. And the second word is bhuva, bhuva. So it's bhu and then vah with a breath at the end. Bhuva. So we'll put these two sounds together. Bhur, bhuva. Bhur, bhuva. And the third sound, suvaha, suvaha, suvaha. Nice and easy. Now we'll put the three sounds together, but notice there's a slight change when we put all three sounds together. Bhur, bhuva, suvaha. Bhur, bhuva, suvaha. Bhur, bhuva, suvaha. Bhur, bhuva, suvaha. That's it. Now, did you notice the slight change? What happened was the second sound, bhuvah, joined to the third one. So instead of bhuvah, it became bhuvasuvaha. It's like the sound lifts a little bit. Bhuvasuvaha. And the breath comes into the sa. Bhuvasuvaha. Now we'll try putting these three sounds to a pitch. So we'll explore, see if this pitch feels comfortable. Om. Does that pitch feel good? Yes, great. So we'll sound the Om and then these three sounds. And when we sound the Om to begin, we sound it with 4 measures. Om. So the 4th measure of the Om is the silence. It never is 3 measures only. It's not Om and then straight into talking. It's Om. And then we begin. So we'll sound the Om once more. Om. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Om. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Bhur bhuvasuvaha. Beautiful. Now we will end this part of the Sanskrit chanting by going like this. Bhur bhuvasuvarom. Bhur bhuvasuvarom. Bhur bhuvasuvarom. Bhur bhuvasuvarom. end of part 1. We'll have a very short part 2, very, very short, just in the last minute. And what we can do is just sound these vowels connected to the sun. And they are A, E, U, I, O. And then we'll finish with Ah. Or we can say aha. So we'll just go through these vowels once more. We have A, E, U, I, O, aha. Now what we're going to try is sounding these on that same pitch. So we sound And lastly, we'll sound each of these 6 vowels with a nasal at the end. And as this is for harmony and health, we'll choose the nasal because that nasal will follow on nicely to the presentation which is coming up later on food and cooking. Because this sound is the one we all use as humans if we find something delicious and the body is really enjoying it. And this is such a common sound in Sanskrit mantras. So we'll sound Iti Samskrita, and may these sounds be there with you whenever you need them.
Wonderful, guys. Sanskrit. Thank you so much. I hope everyone else found that as calming as I did. There's something about the vibrations and those little moments in between the sounds where you were just silent and lovely. Great. Oh, and if you want to hear more, there is a podcast coming out with Gaia Sanskrit on the Harmony and Health podcast where there's some more beautiful chants to listen to. So look out for that. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Eleni.
Thank you, Gabriella. That was such a great preparation. I'm very interested in Ayurveda. It helped me to understand Hippocrates and the language, the Sanskrit language, and its connection with ancient Greek and how one came from the other and they're connected is fascinating. So let's start with something that represents the sun. This is the humble chamomile. Dimitra, in one of our previous workshops, spoke about it. The word chamomile means something like an apple that grows on the ground because you find it very low. And now is the time to collect it, and has an amazing scent. Collect it and wash it and dry it for when winter comes, in order to have it as a potion, as a tea. But you could enjoy it now as well because it's bitter. And this time of the year, this season, is the summer, and it's the pitta season, the season of the fire. There's increased heat. We feel it in our body. And some of us enjoy it because we are generally cold, and some of us who have more fire find it difficult to cope with. Others who have too much fluid in their body, they have more kapha, find it equally helpful because it dries us out. But as we spoke in the workshop on pitta, which is the time, this is the force inside us that brings the fire, the transformation, and helps digestion. We need to do the opposites in order to balance it. So during pitta time, so during the summer, it's good to have foods that are lighter, because the body, in its wisdom, following the rhythms of the season and going with the flow, reduces the fire in the body. So our ability to digest food lessens. So we need to give foods to the body that are lighter in order for it to cope. So what are these foods? Are foods that are fresh, and fresh salads, and foods that are uncomplicated, so cooked with less spices, of course less hot spices, and less of ginger perhaps, and start with eating raw salads. And there's plenty of lettuce at this time of the year, and other greens. Anyone recognize this? Dandelion, yes. But there's a very similar one. It's when they look the same, but they're not. This one is much softer and is less bitter than the dandelion. Let me see. The dandelion also looks like this. And this, I haven't found yet what it's called in English, but it grows all over the English countryside. I just cut it from my garden. And it has a yellow flower and produces like the dandelion, the same kind of seeds that fly away. When Dimitra and I went to Oxfordshire to visit Dr. Bach's flower essence, the place where he had his flower essences, we found it in the countryside. And as Dr. Bach said, we have everything around us that we need in order to feed ourselves. Anyway, there is a podcast coming up, Julia, isn't there, soon, about our visit to Dr. Bach's house. So have a listen to it. It's interesting. There's also plenty of other herbs growing at this time of the season, which we can use. This is lemon verbena. and it has an amazing lemony taste. You could use it to make a cup of tea, and you could combine it with a bit of cinnamon, because cinnamon is sweet. And the other foods that balance the fire at this time of the year are sweet foods. So this is the time to eat sweet. So you put a little bit of cinnamon in some hot water and lemon verbena, let it for half hour, let it cool, put it in the fridge, add some honey and drink it cold throughout the day, because cool drinks are good at this time. The other foods to eat is fruit. There's plenty of fresh fruit around, strawberries, mango, peaches, apples when they come soon, strawberries, all the berries, watermelon, they're very good to eat. Just remember to give 2 hours in between other meals that you have. The body needs different juices to digest fruit, so have them separately with other foods, and never combine them with yogurt, despite culture out there. You could use borage. If you want to be naughty now and then and drink a Pimm's with lemonade, you can put a bit of borage flowers, or you can use the flowers in the fresh salad you prepare. You could chop some of the leaves, not too many. They have a cucumbery taste, and use cucumber as well. And in your salad, put some fennel. Now, if you don't have fennel in the garden, or in your window boxes, buy some fennel seeds for next year, because fennel is very easy to grow, very fragrant, and helps digestion, both fennel seeds and the actual green herb, which you can use in salads. And it grows very easily. You don't need to do anything. You just put the seeds and they grow. Buy the seeds from a gardener shop, not from the supermarket. And you chop it in your salad, or you put it in your spinach pie, or in a soup. Light soups. Light is good to have at this time of the year as well. Other things to have is, if your digestion is not so good, you could take some black cumin seeds. Now, they are different than the regular cumin. They're much smaller and black. There's actually, be careful not to buy onion seeds, which look exactly the same. So black cumin seeds, you roast them a little bit on a pan, and then you grind them. The roasting process allows the oils to come up, and they are the ones that you want. And then you grind them, and then you mix them with equal amount of honey, put them in the fridge, and you have half a teaspoon before your food in a little bit of hot water, and drink it. If your digestion is not strong, this mixture will help you. Another cooling drink to have is coriander seeds. Now, we talked about coriander tea during winter as a herbal remedy for colds. But this time of the year, you need to put the coriander seeds in cold water at night. If you put 3 tablespoons in a big glass of cold water and let them overnight, strain them in the morning and drink it. It's a very cooling drink that helps to reduce the excess heat that this time of the year brings. I'm finishing soon. Just to add that other foods to have are rice, boiled rice, which is sweet again, and you want sweet things. Avoid meat if possible, and astringent and bitter foods are also good. And coconut oil and coconut milk and coconut water are quite cooling and the right time of the year to have them. And with the preparations such as Gabriella shared with us today, where we calm our mind, which calms our digestion and brings attention to the body, is quite a good preparation for us to have a meal and enjoy the food and take all the nutrients. So that's for me today.
Thank you, Eleni. So many gems there. I know you might provide us with a little reminder sheet. Thank you. And so interesting, I know we talked a lot in the earlier sessions about how important digestion is for health. And if that's not right, then, you know, everything else can't really happen, like movement and other things that make us feel good. So some lovely tips, thank you. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Joanna Byers. Welcome, Joanna. And she's going to talk to us about cognitive fatigue and what we can do to help manage that. Over to you, Joanna.
Great. And I've got about 15 minutes, is that right?
Yes, that's great.
Lovely. So just as a brief introduction, I am currently in the NHS. I'm wearing my uniform. I work at the moment as an occupational therapist, both in major trauma and in care of the elderly. And in both of those sectors, we see a lot of people presenting with quite significant fatigue, which impacts on their abilities to carry out what we describe as activities of daily living. So I think what's certainly true from what we know already about COVID or long COVID syndrome is that fatigue is a prevalent symptom. Fatigue can be overwhelming and very debilitating in performing things that you would otherwise take as normal in your day-to-day. So my background is in medicine. I transitioned into occupational therapy due to my interest in the intersection between health and function. And so I think what I'd like to focus on today is the functional elements of what we describe as good health, which to my mind is the ability to perform things that we hold as valuable, given that health is a spectrum of dis-ease to well-being. We want to be able to do the things that make us feel well, that fill us up with joy and bring us good balance in our day-to-day life. So with COVID, or with the outcome of COVID as a fatigue symptom, I think people are beginning to present further down the line with perhaps mental health troubles such as anxiety and depression or low mood result as a direct result of not being able to do the things that they want to do. So the purposes of the next 10 or 15 minutes will just be a kind of a talk through some of the things that we use to troubleshoot with people. Now, a lot of these things are highly personal. It relies on individuals sort of using the toolkit and adapting them for their own use. So it's very easy, I think, and we all do it, to gloss over so-called self-help ideas and concepts and think that we'll come back to them tomorrow or another time. Certainly things in health typically present early with perhaps pharmacological input for things like fatigue, maybe sleeping medications, or, as Eleni's gone through beautifully, you know, different types of food to help us rest and recover. And I think those things are critically important when we take it in the global context of fatigue as a very broad symptom. Likewise, things like exercise and gentle movement, when facilitated correctly and brought in the context of a person's overall function. Perhaps you're dealing in addition with a, you know, an illness or an injury to an ankle or whatever it may be. Rest, exercise and adequate nutrition and medication as needed are all vital components of fatigue management. So we can think of fatigue management as a sort of toolbox, if you like. But the things that I want to pull out of that toolbox today are the things that are perhaps more often glazed over or sort of pushed to the back as something that can be come back to at a later date. And really, in reality, these things are, I believe, critical in allowing people to develop new perspectives on their health and to consider what I would describe as their roles. Now, let me break that down for you a bit. In the context of fatigue, we all hold different roles in our day-to-day life. Perhaps you're a mother, sister, daughter, father, brother, professional in whatever capacity you work and carry out activities of daily life in. And when you're limited in any one of those activities, it can be not only frustrating, but very difficult. So when we think about cognitive fatigue and the implications resulting from perhaps not being able to meet some of those demands, we really need to dial it right back to basics. Now, this time that we have together is short. And as I say, you know, much of the ideas that I will mention can be accessed further online. Certainly there's some good resources on the NHS website and other evidence-based literature that you can find quite easily. But I do recommend that all of us, you know, not just at times where we present with symptoms that are more difficult to manage, but as a general rule in our very busy daily lives, take moments quite regularly to troubleshoot rather than firefighting, and consider active selection of those occupations that we find valuable and that bring us health and meaning in our lives. So I think we have some questions and answers after this session. So perhaps if it would be useful, we can return, you know, on a case-by-case basis to perhaps some questions that you have. Typically, we can extend activities that we need to plan in as being quite broad. That might be commuting to work, that might be carrying out a day of work, but it's also really simple things like showering yourself, making a meal for the family, getting to bed on time, having enough sleep. Perhaps even going to the toilet can be difficult for some people. So I will first break this down into what we widely advocate as the 4 Ps. Now, this can seem quite obvious and quite straightforward, but again, I would suggest that in reality, very few of us are very good at actively prioritizing our days and planning in advance so that we don't have too many commitments in our day and too many pressures on our time when it comes to the occupations that we find valuable and that we need to be able to do. So in managing our fatigue, the first P that I'd like to talk about is planning. Okay, it seems very straightforward, and a lot of us in this day and age use technology to our advantage to plan quite effectively and efficiently the task that we need to do. That said, it can also backfire on us in that we plan to do a great deal of things in our day-to-days. Now, again, simple things being simple, it may not seem like a particular revelation, but planning in advance so that we allocate time and breaks between the activities that we plan and the activities that bring us, that we hold responsibility for, or that bring us pleasure, is really important. So planning is the first critical P that we would use right with patients presenting from, recovering from significant brain injury, to those people much further down the line at the end of an injury or an illness, such as long COVID syndrome. So planning is a really important component of our day-to-day thriving, and using tools that can be easily found online, like an activity diary, or a big calendar that you stick up in your family kitchen, or a daily routine planner, so that you are visualizing what you are aiming to accomplish in a day-to-day, so that you can see it, is a great first step. The next thing that I've already touched on is the art of active prioritization. Now, again, being busy is sometimes held up as a badge of honor in our society, and the ability to do everything and complete tasks to time in a timely fashion is very much part of our societal norm. That said, I think it's perhaps fair to say that for many of us, we prioritize a great many things in our day, and we aim to complete many roles and activities within a waking period. And so I put it to you that, particularly if you are experiencing symptoms of fatigue, that you actively prioritization. So thinking very specifically about those things that you absolutely value in your day and your week and in your working day, perhaps, the roles that you want to achieve, and those things that can perhaps be put back for a later date, is a simple but highly important thing that we can do perhaps better. I haven't talked about this yet, but one of the things that we look at typically in hospital for people who are facing fatigue as a very significant symptom is use of equipment. Now, this might not be something that you want to or need to do at the moment, but there are very simple things that you can aim to adjust in terms of the third P, which I describe as positioning. Now, if you're typically a busy mum or chef or whatever it may be, if you aim to prepare the family meal, for example, in the evening, do you stand up to cook, or do you sit down at the table? Do you stand up in the shower, or do you have a stool? Do you wash at the sink, or do you sit down? These are small adjustments that you can make to your day that may have a profound effect when added up to your overall fatigue levels. We demand a lot on our body, and there are some things that we can adjust through simple positioning, like even getting a more restful night's sleep by perhaps propping yourself up with pillows, thinking about how many times you stand up and sit down from a chair in the day. Those simple things that can often be overlooked, but are physically demanding. And the last thing that we talk about when we think about energy conservation is pacing. So again, thinking when we prioritize and when we plan, that we go at a pace that sustains us and is sustainable. So I could describe this more easily perhaps in what we often refer to as the activity cycle. Now, this is frequently talked about in oncological fields where people have fatigue from chemotherapy, for example. It's very common that you have good days and bad days. And when you have good days, you do a lot. And then perhaps you end up having a bad day because you've done a lot, not because it's going to be a bad day, but because you're overly fatigued. It's a classic human trait to overinvest when we're feeling good. We thrive, we put out, we achieve things, and we do a lot in our days. With fatigue, less is frequently more. So if we can plan and prioritize and perhaps position in order to pace ourselves, that can have a huge impact on our overall trajectory and recovery. Now, what I'm talking about when I think about activity is that we avoid and break out of this negative cycle of activity where we have a good day, we overexert ourselves, we have increased fatigue, and then we have prolonged rest as a result. Okay, this is a very common theme that people enter into. And being sort of cognizant of that and anticipating those times where we perhaps feel good and feel confident in our abilities, it's a wonderful place to be. But again, that's where the planning and prioritization kicks in, so that we don't have a negative overall outcome and our trajectory to recovery is much smoother. Does that make sense? So that's a whistle-stop tour through 4 things that are really quite simple, but are also remarkably challenging to implement consistently, and can be overlooked, I think, in terms of more complex interventions, which sometimes can be difficult to achieve or problematic. I think emotionally, it's very easy to berate ourselves and to feel challenged on those days that we don't feel as good. But if we can remind ourselves and perhaps keep either a mood diary or a planning diary, so that we can see that the achievements that we're making in our day-to-day are actually all right, you know, and the roles that we find valuable and important are being met, perhaps in a reduced fashion. That sustainability and overall trajectory is what is important, and it's being very compassionate towards ourselves as we make those steps towards change. So I think as a final comment, and I'm willing to take questions, I'm sure there's other questions for the other speakers, apologies for being late, but I think as a final point, you know, really allowing ourselves time to make those changes and consider where we are and how willing we are to make those changes is an important thing to consider. We can all make changes all the time, and fatigue and perhaps low mood or anxiety can really dampen down our motivation to make shifts towards what can often be a more positive lifestyle choice, that can arise very simply from structuring our time and being very assertive on what we are willing to take forward, particularly at times where we're feeling especially fatigued. So I hope those 4 Ps and the concept of the activity cycle are helpful ones. Again, it's a very individual process, so I'm happy to talk through with anybody or have email contact afterwards with anyone who wants to go through a bit more of those concepts. But that's all from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Joanna Byers. It's great just to hear, you know, from an expert. It's hard managing fatigue. And I know from my own experience and talking to some of the others who've been on this course with us, it was a bit of a trial and error. You suddenly one day, like you say, you're okay doing things, the next day you can't do anything. And the impact of your roles on that, like you say, as a busy mother, and learning really what to say yes to, what to say no to. And I liked it when you said not firefighting, but sort of planning. And for me, it was booking in time to do nice things for me, which made the biggest difference. And that's, you know, no reason why that shouldn't continue as the energy comes back. Thank you so much. So there will be time for questions. I'll just briefly tell you what's coming up in the next workshop, which is in 2 weeks' time, 1st of July. You'll be looking out on the recordings for Long COVID 7. And we'll have Dr. Hanna Poikinen is going to come back, and she's a dancer, a neuroscientist, and she's going to do some very gentle healing movement with us. I will read some poetry, which is relevant to what we've been going through, but more on the life-affirming side rather than the suffering side. And also there will be a theatre director from Poland who's going to take us through some rhythm exercises, which can also be very healing. So fun one coming up. Thanks very much for joining us.